So, can you see this? Can you see the presentation, everyone? Okay, great. Welcome to the second season of the Korean Cultural Society of Boston's New Music Symposium. We are delighted to have you back for another exciting series of presentations by leading and inspiring musicians. My name is Taeksoo Kim, and I serve as the curator of this symposium. I am also a composer and an assistant professor in music at San Diego State University. We thank you very much for all your ongoing support, especially that by the Korean Consulate General in Boston. And with us here today is Mr. Xúqiūyàn, the Consul General of the Republic of Korea in Boston, who is going to give us congratulatory remarks briefly. An expert of public international law, Mr. Yu received his degrees from Korea University, the University of Edinburgh, and the London School of Economics and Political Science. Mr. Yu has served in the Korean government for 27 years, including 3 years of his service at the ROK Permanent Mission to the UN in New York City. He was also the Director General for International Legal Affairs of the Korean Ministry of Foreign Affairs. And he is now bringing all his diplomatic expertise and experiences to his office, which he assumed in November 2020. He and his office do numerous wonderful things, and I cannot even enumerate all of them, but I'd love to encourage you to visit, like, and subscribe their social media platforms, including their YouTube channel.
Good evening, everyone. It is a great honor and privilege for me to offer a few words tonight. I would like to welcome you to the Korean Cultural Society of Boston's New Music Symposium. Since 2012, the KCSB has been committed to promoting Korean culture in Boston and supporting young Korean American artists from across the United States. I extend my sincere appreciation to the KCSB for arranging this exciting event to promote Korean music. It is with great pleasure, though unfortunately virtually, that I meet tonight's host, Professor Taeksoo Kim, renowned composer and music professor at San Diego State University. I'm convinced that under his stewardship, the symposium will be a resounding success. The 4 sessions this month will introduce you to some contemporary musicians who will explore the meeting of their musical worlds with Korean traditional music, known in Korean as Kugak, Shyu, Gamin, Jiyoung Kim, and Jinny Kim. When I was asked to make some remarks for this event, I wondered what the expression new music actually meant. I now know that new music is an extension of the classical music tradition. It is newly created music written by living composers. I have been particularly looking forward to this event, and it comes at a very interesting time. To many people around the world, K-pop has become almost synonymous with the Korean music, but in fact, Korean music is much more diverse. One of the most fascinating musical genres that is growing in popularity in Korea and elsewhere has deep roots in Kugak, Korea's traditional music. The intersection of classical music and kugak can take a number of different forms. Classical pieces can be arranged and played with kugak instruments, or conversely, kugak musical pieces can be arranged and played with classical music instruments. Alternatively, existing kugak or classical pieces or contemporary musical pieces can be played with both kugak and classical instruments at the same time. It is encouraging to see this trend of Western music being infused with Korean traditional musical elements and together creating entirely new harmonies. I hope that these 4 sessions will contribute to further deepening mutual understanding and friendship between our 2 countries through the active promotion of people-to-people cultural exchanges. Once again, I would like to express my gratitude to the KCSB for organizing this new music symposium and to thank them for the opportunity to meet the inspiring musicians combining traditional Korean music with classical and contemporary music. Now let's all enjoy a wonderful evening of innovative music. Thank you for your kind attention.
Wow. Thank you very much for your wonderful remarks. I thought you were just only an expert in diplomacy, but clearly you have a deep understanding of culture and music. I really, really appreciate your support and wonderful words. And today we are also with the president of Korean Cultural Society of Boston, Professor Byung Kim. And also we have the chair of its music department, Ms. Yoo-kyung Kim. Thank you for being here and thank you for all your help and support. Okay, so finally, I am very excited to introduce today's guest, Maestra Jen Shyu. Guggenheim Fellow, USA Fellow, Doris Duke artist, you name it, Jen Shyu is a multilingual vocalist, composer, multi-instrumentalist dancer. She is the first female and vocalist band leader on Pi Recordings, and she has produced 7 albums, and she has performed at Carnegie Hall, Lincoln Center, National Theater of Korea, among many others. And again, she is a Fulbright scholar speaking not 2, 3, skipping 10 languages. And right before the pandemic, she was touring her solo show, Zero Grasses, commissioned by a renowned composer, improviser, John Zorn. And she was giving free workshops in schools and for families across 50 states, which is now on Patreon. And she is a co-founder with her colleague, Sarah Serpa, of Mutual Mentorship for Musicians to empower and elevate underrepresented musicians around the world. Today, she is going to share her love for Korean traditional music, as known as kugak, and we'll talk about her artistic creations she has made over the years and traveling back and forth to Korea, studying pansori, kayagum, and Donghaen Persian East Coast shaman music. During the presentation, Please feel free to leave any comments and questions on the Zoom chat or on Facebook, which we will deliver to Ms. Jen Shyu. Now, we are so excited. Please welcome Maestra Jen Shyu.
Yay! 감사합니다. 감사합니다. Hi, hello everyone. I'm very, very honored to be here, and yes, I'm actually mainly going to be showing video and doing a little bit of singing. But just to summarize quickly, kind of what led me to Korea. I was born in Dunlap, Illinois, Peoria, Illinois, and then lived in Dunlap. And my parents came from Taiwan. My father came from Taiwan, and my mother came from East Timor. And they met in New York, fell in love, and had my brother and me. And it's a fascinating story how they came together and how we ended up in Illinois, Midwest USA. And I started right away knowing that I was going to be in music on the stage somehow. I was really lucky that my parents were, they had my brother try out piano, and he was very gifted. And I would sit under the piano and listen to him practice. And then when I was old enough, I started playing, and I continued to uh, also learn violin. Ballet actually came before piano and violin, and it was just, I just knew, I fell in love with it immediately. And um, I would say I was trained very rigorously as a classical, Western classical musician, doing piano competitions and violin competitions. And I would say that my peak probably at that age was around 13, 14. I got to play with a symphony orchestra, our local Peoria Symphony Orchestra, and I played the Tchaikovsky third movement, piano concerto number 1. But then I started singing, and that was really what stole my heart, and also took me out of my shyness and my kind of, it was, difficult growing up as one of the few Asians in my school in Dunlap, Illinois. A lot of, I learned at a very early age what racism was, and how to assimilate. I was trying to assimilate to try and, just not be made fun of. And so I, kind of threw myself into music because in my ballet school and the orchestra, everyone accepted me and they didn't judge me. And so I feel like music really saved me in that way and helped me gain confidence. And soon after, I think, yes, soon, like before I went to Stanford and at the end of high school, I discovered musical theater and jazz. And what really I came to learn is Black American music and the tradition of African American music was so attractive for me, and really actually gave me the avenue to express myself, which in Western classical music, I was so busy training with technique and all the repertoire, Stravinsky, and I played a lot of Chopin, and but I was too afraid to improvise and compose. And when I started singing standards and kind of going in the path of jazz singer, I started to just become more free. And in that path, became more interested in my own heritage and my identity as as an Asian American. So it was truly an awakening. Even at Stanford, I was still very kind of uh, a little bit denying my identity as an Asian American. And it wasn't until after I graduated that I met some wonderful musicians. I'm going to type some of their names: Francis Wong, John Jang, Jenny Lim, who's a poet, but they were all in the Bay Area since I moved to the Bay Area right after Stanford. And they really nurtured me and pushed me, to really look inward and see, what about music from Taiwan and East Timor? And so I'm going to start the journey kind of there. I did indeed go to Taiwan. I went to Cuba even because I was curious about um, the history of Chinese indentured laborers, and I wanted to create something about that. So it was really um, all at once when I started really taking seriously this idea of finally composing for the first time, um, going deeply into improvisation, the great African American giants like Charlie Parker, Thelonious Monk, um, and Von Freeman, and I could name so many models of musicians whose solos I learned uh, just as closely as later I would learn pansori. So it's all connected. And so I went to Taiwan first, after getting to go to Cuba and learning about the history of Chinese migration and indentured laborers. And um, I I learned so much in Taiwan. It was my first time doing field work before I even knew what field work was. This is a very old picture of a great folk singer from Taiwan named Chen Da. And so that was my first time trying to learn a tradition. And of course, it was from my dad's heritage. So I got to meet his family at the same time. And from there, I kind of took a long journey. And I kind of I went after kind of trying to understand my parents' roots. So this is just a photo. I could only choose one photo for each journey. It was so hard. But this is just a beautiful photo from the first time I went to East Timor. I went 3 months for the first time in East Timor, and so this is amazing group of singers who just had the most beautiful music, kind of my favorite music that came out of Timor, um, from the North Island called Atauro. And so I just wanted to share that photo. And then I uh, ventured into Indonesia because it was so close, and I'd always been fascinated with Indonesia and Javanese music, especially. And luckily got a Fulbright to go, and I lived almost 2 years there. And it was in Indonesia that um, I met a dancer who was Hawaiian American Chinese and was living in Bali. Um, and even before then, I need to kind of back up because in 2010, before I even went to Timor, I was encouraged by musician friends to watch the movie was it Sopyeonjae, as well as Chunhyanga. So the films of Im Kwon-taek were kind of the first time I heard pansori, actually. And so just it was actually my jazz musician friends who said, "You would love this music and this kind of singing." And so of course I fell in love, and I that was the seed planted. And even though I had all these plans, I was going to go to Timor, then I got a Fulbright to Indonesia, that the fire was burning to to somehow go to Korea someday. And so it was in Indonesia, and it was a very um, mystical meeting with this dancer because he was just talking. He was the student of my dance teacher's late husband. And he said, "Yes, I once I went to Korea and I got to study some traditional Korean dance. And yeah, there's a program that also allows you to learn, gugak, Korean traditional music." And I said, really? And, and it's so funny because that was the first time I met him and the last time I had met him for many, many years. I didn't meet him again until many, many years later. So that was a magical meeting. And he sent, we exchanged emails and he sent me the contact that he had at the Gugak Center, at the 국립국악원, and they happen to have an application open for um, a program called Cultural Partnership Initiative, and this was a 6-month program that was available for actually developing nations, and of course, that didn't count America or Japan or, very developed nations. It was more for Southeast Asia, Russia, where else was included? Of course, Africa and Eastern Europe. So, but because I was still in Indonesia and I was really just hanging out, wanting to learn more, not ready to go back to the US, they I bothered them and bothered them and said I really need to learn pansori. And eventually, the contact there just said, she really is passionate, she has a track record of, already is composing, and she'll do something useful, and she's bound to spread Korean culture, back in the US. So they accepted me, and I got to spend 6 months as my first time in Korea. And I found this beautiful teacher on the left here in the picture is Kwon Song-hee, who became a very, very dear friend. And just talking about the links, the name of my talk is called "Life Has No Boundaries," and that is a line, actually a line of poetry, which you'll hear at the very end by a Taiwanese poet who helped guide me to um, the kind of tradition on the moon lute that you saw in that first picture. So he wrote that line, and that's such a beautiful theme because this teacher, Kwon Song-hee, I met through my good friend in Indonesia because they did a program together in the US. And so all the links, so then Ha Kyung-mi was the lovely lady on the right, and she was my kayaking teacher I met through the CPI program, through the Gugak Center. And so I just wanted to, feature them as we go forward. And of course, I also had a male pansori teacher. And once I got the hang of Seopyeonjae, I was interested in Dongpyeonjae, a very different style. And Baeildong, I got to meet. Also, I knew about Baeildong from the documentary Intangible Asset Number 82, which featured who is now a good friend, Simon Barker, the drummer, jazz drummer from Australia, directed by Emma Franz. And so, and Baeildong was in it, in the film. So I saw the film first, and then I got to meet Baeildong. And then, of course, he was so generous and very philosophical. And so I just wanted to feature him. So how does this all relate to being a composer, and especially as even though I had all the training in classical music, Western classical music, I very much identify myself with creative music, with Black American music, with um, this tradition that I've been very fortunate and privileged to learn and just humbly kind of just be part of this beautiful community that we have globally, not just New York, but around the world. So, um, so I've always, I've kind of been between worlds. It's never been one world. I've kind of, and it's the same with my languages. um, I like to again live without boundaries in terms of I don't like to limit my vision or my aspirations. So yeah, so I kind of want to invoke Bela Bartok because he's a composer I love. Um, and it's so funny because when I started to go to Taiwan and I was starting to do my own field work, I got this book of essays by Bartok called it was just called essays actually. And in one of these essays, like in a very short paragraph, he said, how, like why folk music? And as if you know Bartok's work, he was so avid and intense about transcribing and collecting these melodies from the mountains of Bulgaria, Transylvania, and whatnot. He would go around with kodai and record on a wax cylinder, and probably before the term ethnomusicology existed. So, and then he would compose this completely revolutionary, innovative music. So how does that come about? And he, in the small paragraph, he said, well, one way to think about it is when you go and learn a traditional melody, you first absorb it, you learn it exactly, and you try to sing it exactly as you're taught. So we're kind of going to go with this kind of thinking, not that I didn't really do that as a practitioner, but it's a really nice way to talk about it. Because it rings true in some cases. I just feel that there's a lot of life and experience that's mixed in, that's a lot more spiritual and mystical than this very kind of logical way. But it's useful in a context like this. So we'll just use an example, pansori, when I first started learning. Of course, I had to begin learning Korean because it's a storytelling tradition. And so I kind of jumped in both at the same time. Of course, my Korean was not good when I first started learning pansori, and therefore my pansori was not as good as it is now. So that's fascinating with these kinds of oral traditions. It shows how important the language is. So this is just from a lesson that Kwon Sung-hee and I had. And so let's just listen to this one section. It's from Shimcheonga, when she is on the boat. She's already gotten on the boat with the sailors. She's about to sacrifice herself for her father to gain his sight back. So it's that part of the piece. So let's just listen a little bit. Can you hear? Oh my God.
한곳 당도하니 이난 곳 인당수라 대천바다 한가운데 바람 불고 물결 처한게 기석거 찾아
Yes, so beautiful. You could hear that, listen to her forever. But very special voice. And I really connect with Kwon Sung-hee also. I just wanted to add because she is also a songwriter and creative musician. So both of us had a lot to learn from each other. Even though I was primarily learning pansori from her, I would take time as we became really close friends to just show her some stuff about improvisation. And so yes, very magical. And I would say I was definitely attracted to teachers like that and all the traditions that I have been able to learn. So here is the stage of internalizing, or basically it's like learning a language. You start with copying. It's like when you imitate your mother and father, right? When you start learning how to speak. So this is the level where I'm learning that language and trying my hardest to pronounce everything well, sing everything well. And this was after just 5 months of starting this whole journey. So learning Korean, learning pansori. So Kwon Sung-hee is playing Soribuk, and this is our kind of final concert. So I'll do exactly that section. And so let me start. So I'll fast forward. So 한국 당도. So this is of course in pansori there's the changdan, which is the long, short rhythm, the chants that the drum kind of rhythms that absolutely the singer must understand and be able to dialogue with the percussionist. And so this is in 5, yes, so here we go. See how we do. And now we start.
이난 인당수라 대천
Sorry. Yes, so that was very fun. So that is, you can actually see that on YouTube. It's the whole section. It's like 21 minutes long. So so exciting. And you know, it's like when I was in Korea, I just like while I was at the gym or if I was running, I would just have her lessons in my headphones and just over and over. I would practice at the Gugai Center until 9 p.m. when it closed, and the guard would always like kick me out. But such a joy. And so then, you know, well, what are the stages after that? Well, you could actually add like an accompaniment to the melody. You could also make the melody the foreground if you're arranging. I'm going to kind of go into another realm, which is you could actually sing it as you learn it, but in a very different context. So after Korea, after the long journey from Indonesia through Korea, through East Timor, I was gone from New York for 3 years, basically. And you know, after that time, I knew, actually during the whole time, I knew I was going to create a solo piece, and I was able to meet an incredible filmmaker named Garin Nugroho in Indonesia. And he, you know, is a big star. He's like David Lynch in, he's like the David Lynch of Indonesia, independent, but very, very kind of celebrity filmmaker and just incredible artist. So I kind of want to share his name with you, Garin Nugroho. Um, and you can Google him and see his work. But so I asked him to direct my first solo piece, and I knew that part of it, a big part of it, was going to be related to my time in Korea. So it was a very personal, kind of autobiographical piece, a journey that included traditional songs that I learned, arrangements of them, and then my original music that just, uh, as Bartok says, the ultimate goal is to create your own work, but still has the essence of the tradition that inspired you. And what does that mean? That's so vague, right? So, you know, I kind of attempted to to kind of experiment with what that could mean. So here's a picture of of the show that we created, just one of the stage pictures. You'll see I'm playing kayagum, and there's a red scarf over my face, and that is actually called the slendang, which is a Javanese cloth. And so now I'm actually going to show, let's see here. Ah, yeah, just a photo. So this is another costume from the show. And of course, if you know Seungmu and traditional dance from Korea, you'll recognize this kind of form of the costume. So um, very different context again, and just inspired by the shape, the long sleeves and the hood. But we used it as kind of a statement of environmental crisis. And so, and then at the time, I was also moving to rhythms from Kalimantan, which is in Indonesia. So very different context. So I'm going to show you, let's see if I can stop share. Oh, how do I stop share? Ah, hold on. See, I can't here. I'm going to escape out of, sorry. The keynote doesn't let me do it. So I will stop share and I will start sharing. Are there any questions so far? Thank you, Nelson. Yes.
I don't see any questions so far.
Okay.
So
I'll just
yeah,
carry on. Let's see, where is the, hold on here. I have to find the video. Yes, so I'm going to show you an excerpt. Hold on here. Oh, hold on. I have to reshare. Yes. Sorry. Let's reshare. There we go. There's the video. So this is from a performance that was the premiere. This is actually the premiere performance at Roulette Intermedium, which is one of my favorite venues in Brooklyn. And Godin was there. Godin was there. He had stayed for 2 weeks. And this is a piece where you'll see I'm actually doing a Javanese dance called tayuban. And then I cover my face. I shouldn't give the surprise, but anyway, you'll see the dance. And then you'll see me move to the kayagam. And the melody I'm singing is a Javanese traditional melody, which I'll sing it first for you. And because it sounds very different alone if it compared to when you hear it with the kayagam. So let's see, I would do, so I think it was, yeah. So so I learned, while I was in Indonesia, I was studying Javanese singing called Sindenan as vigorously as I was with pansori. So it's the same process, just like learning a language, just imitating to the very, very timbre and vibrato of the voice of my teacher. So let's just start. Let's see if it'll play. Here we go. Can you hear? I'm going to pause. The first song that I'm singing is actually a poem by an Indonesian poet friend of mine who passed away, unfortunately. So I'm singing his lyrics, and I wrote the harmony on the kayagam. And so then I'll go into the traditional Javanese melody. So here we go again. Kubuar hujan dari keringatku,
Involved also my.
Yes, so I'm going to skip ahead a little bit.
A beautiful.
To binari. So, so as you saw, I was using the kayagam also in a very different way, like using the bridge in a very percussive way. I guess in Western music they call it extended techniques, but I really it fit with the poetry of the Indonesian at the time, and you'll begin to see with my work again. Life has no boundaries. I'm bringing things together in a very organic way. So let me skip to 707. So one of the vocal traditions that I started learning is called binari, which is a blessing, and so I was lucky to learn from a female teacher named Jo Moonju, but I got to also see Lee Gwang-soo live perform, so that was exciting. I got to meet him after performance. So here we no. So this is like a performance, like I was mentioning. It's a performance of kind of the way I tried to imitate exactly my teacher, but you'll see, and it's a whole different context. And you'll hear a little bit of the interview of my explaining this part of the show. So, okay.
자유는 사바세계 소문나 북조로다 해동은 대한민국 각대각 가정에 몽중살 없을 소냐 몽중살 불고 가자.
That fan really is used in pansori, but you know, we were like putting it through the curtain, which also in itself was a reference to, you know, traditional theater and also Balinese theater where they had the dancer come out of the curtain and they go behind and change character and they come out again, you know. So that itself was, you know, a reference. But the fan, you know, putting the arm through and then opening it, and, you know, that was all the imagination.
누군지가 3년에 아이고 갑가 보여라.
So yeah, I was answering a question. So I forgot to mention the name of this show that we're kind of looking at excerpts. It's called Solo Write 7 Breaths. So this was my first theatrical, like long form solo piece. Before I was just doing gigs, music, you know, but especially being in Korea, seeing a lot of theater in Korea, also in Indonesia, and I just wanted to broaden, you know, I didn't want to just play music. I wanted to act and play different characters. So yeah, so this is my first attempt kind of at doing that. And so I'm going to, and oh, someone asked about Kayagum. Hold on here. I have to get out of full screen. Sorry. I'm going to switch to this video. So let's see, I want to answer the question about Kayagum. You know, I fell in love with Kayagum when I was learning pansori, and I actually, they gave us a choice at the Gugak Center. They have a 2-week international workshop, which is amazing, which I think is on hold because of the pandemic, but I think it's still scheduled for October. But I encourage any of the, you know, foreigners watching to apply for this program. I've helped many friends get into this program, and it's 2 weeks only, but it's an intensive course in kind of going through many traditions of study. Like they invite many different lecturers and practitioners to talk about Gyeonggi Minyo and pansori, and so they gave us a choice of Kayagum or Haegum. So I chose Kayagum, and so I just loved the sound. I loved, you know, I have a very good friend named Jocelyn Clark. I don't know if she's watching, but she's such a phenomenal musician, and I think she's famous in Korea. But she actually helped me, she helped introduce me to her Kayagum maker. And I got to I have 2 Kayagums from him, and he's like a regional, I forget the Korean term, but he holds a regional, he's a holder of the tradition of making Kayagum, and I believe, I don't want to misspeak, but I believe he makes Haegum also, but I'm not totally certain, but he was very generous. I got, you know, 2 beautiful Kayagums at a great price, and I think that was mainly, I just started also learning Kayagum Byongchang, which is the tradition of playing Kayagum while singing. And of course, I'm always interested in any traditions that bind dance and song, or song and instrument. So yeah, that was, I thought that with that Javanese melody, it provided a beautiful, you know, I created harmonies that of course, we're not in the tuning at all of the of Javanese gamelan, but I thought it would fit, and it had a much kind of sadder feel that fit the mood of that song, which I kind of dedicated to my poet friend who had passed away, my Javanese poet and puppeteer friend. So yeah, so I hope that explains that a little bit. So this is then. So now I'm going to try to transition into the next solo piece because it's a long process. So I premiered this Solo Right 7 Breaths piece, released an album, which for those of you who were in the waiting room, that was a song from that album called Mother of Time. And actually, the lyrics are based on a beautiful experience I had at the first, my first time at the, it was a Buddhist ritual, which they only have once a year, every June 6th. And so we had a beautiful interaction with some monks. And so the lyrics were about that. But it was based on a Javanese melody. And then at the very end, I was actually singing some binari. So this, again, singing the traditional way that I learned, but in the context of now this is still in Solo Right 7 Breaths, and I'm going to lead into Nine Doors and how I kind of took it a little further. So this is from Ojai Festival. That year it was curated by Vijay Iyer, who's a great pianist, composer, improviser, if you don't already know his work. But yes, so this is like in the moment where it's, you know, what I loved about even like Pansori, it involved the chuimse, you know, the participation from the audience. And I feel like we've lost that a little bit, in especially Western classical music. You're not supposed to clap, and it's very, you know, everyone's very still. But, you know, and also in Donghyang Goshingut, it's very, you know, there's almost no divide between the shaman performers and the people witnessing. You know, it's everyone's talking together, and they're participating in the ritual. So this is kind of a ritual we created on the stage with an audience member. So here we go.
So how are you today? Fine? Any stress, worries? Kids, parents, work, world? Yeah, that's the main stress, President. Anyway, so all of those stresses, I want you to just release them through this bamboo, the end of it, and it's just gonna dissipate. Because stress cannot exist without a host, right? So if we keep it in, yes, it will
So I'm kind of
devour
talking
us.
about
But if we
binari, the spirit of binari.
release it. So in Korean, there's a
Releasing the bad
verb called pul,
energies.
pulda, and it means to release. So that's what we're gonna do. Okay, and you don't need this huge piece of bamboo. You can use your pen, like he's using a pen right now. He's taking copious notes. So you can like just you can like channel all your stress through that pen, and it'll just come out. So household items, very, very useful. Okay, here we go. So just relax and just follow the beat. And we're all gonna clap along to this rhythm. Great. A little slower. 1, 2, 3. 1, 2, 3. Yeah. Ready? 상방의 영의 불봉만 제로 구려 만제. You really dig it. 제야 나 I'm getting all the bad spirits off of you. 열이 올 사랑만 마십소사. Your turn. 옹옹예 옹이로다. 옹옹옹예. 운이 갑니다.
So yeah, you get the idea. I just wanted you to hear the melody because So you heard the other Binari melody, which so this melody usually comes after the melody we heard before. So 천개 우주 하나 유지개조 죽당 생길 태국 태민한 범연자시. That's first, and then it goes into the more different rhythm. So 상몽희경의 불봉만. So let's see if I go out of the screen. 아론 갑니다. So now something also that, you know, probably someone who writes musicals is more apt to do this. So I'm very interested, being multilingual, in seeing how different languages can be translated, you know. So I do a lot of translating into English, because I want to kind of bring these ideas and bring these beautiful traditions and meanings behind lyrics to Western audience, to my, you know, the people I grew up around. So, so this is same rhythm, what we just heard. And I'm actually telling the story of Baridegi. So I'm sure many of you know the legend of Baridegi. And I'm not going to explain it because it's all in these lyrics. So I adapted that melody to tell this story. So I'm just going to sing it right now. In the show, I actually use, actually, I think I use the Timorese gong, which is right here. So this is my Timorese gong that I bought from an elder in the mountains. So actually, I can play it. All right, so let's see if you can hear. So, a queen gave birth to 6 daughters, but not yet one son. The king wished his 7th to be a son. Oh, what to do when Baridegi was born a girl? So the king lay Baridegi in a jade boat and set her off floating down the river. Wearing the sign abandoned princess, an elderly couple discovered her and raised her deep in the mountains till she was 15. Then one day the king fell ill and had a mysterious dream that the only cure was holy water brought to him by Baridegi. Holy water from the world of the dead. When the king woke, he ordered his men to find his daughter. And when they found her deep in the mountains, they begged her, would you please save your sick father, the self-same king who left you for dead? Will you risk your life for his? 나무댁 가중 나무댁 동중 이러니 저러니 할지라도 Yes, I will go. 이댁 가중 드시거들랑 Is this blind filial piety? 우리나 밝읍시고요. Selfless love, forgiveness, magnanimity, 무리나 말가. So that's an example of how I kind of translated into English, but I kind of retain the spirit of the traditional way of singing. And so, yes, later, actually, I want to then, I'm going to sing a little, so I'm going to play a piece, but before I do that, there's this whole other, I want to finish the Baridegi story. So if you remember the 천개 우주 하나를 요지게 해줘 죽당 생길, it's the other rhythm, the first rhythm in Binari. So same thing, I won't do the whole thing, but you'll get the idea. So this is totally different rhythm. So Baridegi dove into the world of the dead, where the king there claimed that she could bring back the holy water to her father if she labored 9 long years. 3 years collecting firewood, 3 years of carrying water, 3 years making fire, and only then could she earn the holy water. And so she hurried back to bring her father the water of life. But by the time she arrived at the kingdom, he was already dead, already carried upon the shoulders of the funeral bearers. But Buddy Degi refused. Even then to give up hope, she poured down the water of life into her father's cold mouth. Soon he was resurrected, father-daughter reunited. Hanariujige Dochuk, Kaktiga Kajunge. Thus was the firstborn shaman, mother of all the great shaman souls. Anyway, so that is kind of what happens in the show. Of course, there's staging and lighting and everything. But yeah, so that is something I brought in when I did this solo version. But before I even created Nine Doors, and again, this was premiered 2 years. Oh, is that true? 5 years? No, 3 years after the first piece called Song of Silver Geese. So I'm going to now share. Yes, Nelson, because he knows Song of Silver Geese. So Nine Doors. So what happened was I created Song of Silver Geese, which is what you'll hear very soon, for 10 musicians, including myself, and including the Mivo String Quartet. And then the 6 other members were my band, including myself. So, and then after that, I had the opportunity to, again, actually, who invited me? I premiered a piece, the piece inspired by Song of Silver Geese called Nine Doors. So it was in a way a solo version, but very much expanded. I also went to Japan, started learning biwa. And so I brought in 2 biwa pieces into this new solo version, but the plot was still related to Song of Silver Geese and the death of my Javanese puppeteer friend. So yes, very complex. But I'll go ahead and share back to the presentation. And let's see. So this is, let's see here. Oh, there's still some little filler. I'm going to show you what Donghae and Blosingut looks like, because the next piece I'm going to play for you is very much inspired by some of those rhythms. So I'm going to show you visually, just like we're going to just dive into one of the rituals. And again, Simon Barker, the drummer, introduced me to this beautiful family, and they are descendants of Kim Sok-chul, the late master drummer, shaman, musician. So I'm just going to jump in and play. And this is at 4:30. So much good field work. My Patreons have seen this whole video. So here I'm going to just right here. So this is my teacher's.
할배가 좀 도와줘야 안 되는 게 할배가 품어줘야 되고 우쭈르고 받들어줘야만이 할배가 가려면 대게가 많이 나야 안 되겠습니까 할배요. 대게 물건은 안 떨어지게 점지하시고 생산도 잘.
So very different from Pansori, very different kind of voice, and so my teacher is actually, I was saying, Sol Hanna is my teacher, young woman, originally a Pansori singer, but she fell in love with Donghae Blosingut and ended up studying, and she fell in love and married Kim Dong-on's son. So the woman who was just singing is my teacher's mother-in-law. So that's the story. So there you see kind of, again, this participation, it's like everyone is together making this ritual happen, and it wouldn't work without the performers. It wouldn't work without the people who live there. So I really loved that. So this is, again, going into Life Has No Boundaries. In the story of Nine Doors, so I should explain a little bit about what Song of Silver Geese is, and which later became Nine Doors. So I had a very good friend, the friend who introduced me to my pansori teacher, and his name was, let's see here, I'm going to put this in the chat. He was a great dalang, and in Javanese dalang, Sri Jokora Harjo Chilik. Dalang is the puppeteer of the Javanese shadow puppetry tradition called Wayang Kulit. So he was a very young, up and coming, great young master of this tradition, and he did a fellowship called One Beat in the U.S. And there he met Kwon Song-yi, who later became my teacher. And I was in Indonesia at the time. I helped him like do the application. So he came back from the U.S. back to Indonesia after a month of being in the U.S. and collaborating with Kwon Song-yi and all the other musicians. And he said, and he played me a recording of Kwon Song-yi and him playing something with Kwon Song-yi. And I heard her voice. I said, wow, she's amazing. And so then, of course, this is before I knew I was going to go to Korea. This is why it's very, very mystical. So then he, when I did have the opportunity to go to Korea and I was looking for a pansori teacher, that's when I got in touch with Song-yi. And so sadly, very sadly, after my Fulbright ended and I'd already been back from Korea, went back to Indonesia, then came back to the U.S. I arrived in the U.S., back to New York in February of 2014. And then I got this email that Sri Joko was killed in a car crash in June. And not just him, but his wife and his baby son, who was only 10 months old. And his daughter, who I knew very well, 6 years old at the time, she survived. So it was crushing. It still is, a tragedy that I think the community in the gamelan world has not, won't recover from. So I decided, I didn't know then, but the kind of beginnings of Song of Silver Geese began when that accident happened. And so that's kind of the premise of it. And you'll see the kind of theatrical version of the solo version at the end. But that was the core of the story, was about this young girl, 6 years old, lost her parents and her younger 10-month-old brother, and how she goes on into the world. So the kind of story that the choreographer and I created, the choreographer being Satoshi Haga, who is an amazing dancer, Japanese, but has been living in New York for a very long time. He was my co-creator of Song of Silver Geese. We premiered it in 2016, and we had many stories going. So it was not only this car accident that was kind of the catalyst at the beginning, but the story of Baridegi, because this young girl, we imagine that, she's in the car, her family has perished, and she actually is in there for many minutes before police come. And this is true. This is just from what friends of friends had told me. So, so she was there. So we imagine in this story, like, what if time stopped and she was guided by these woman warriors, Baridegi being one. Another legend that I was very interested in is from the Wehali Kingdom. And the Wehali Kingdom is before Timor was split into East and West Timor, it was just Timor. And so, and the Wehali Kingdom it was a huge region on the southern part of Timor. So there's a legend called, they call it Atibatik, the legend of Atibatik. She also has the name Ho'ar Nahat Samane, Nahat Samane, and that Ho'ar Nahat Samane one. So her name in Tetun Wehali, in the language, actually means is like a man, because in the legend she actually dresses like a man to save her brothers who have become slaves of a rival king, because they lost in gambling via cockfighting. So very, very, very old story. And so I had read about this book, before I even went to Timor. I had this book that had this story transcribed. So I had been sitting with this story for so long. And this was kind of, okay, I somehow want to tie this together. So Nala, the young daughter of my friend, she meets Ati Batik. Ati Batik, tells her very strong story. It's very abstract. Then she meets Baridegi, who has this incredible story, strangely enough, very parallel. Baridegi, as many of you might know, she was the seventh daughter of, she had six sisters. She was the seventh daughter. She was supposed to be a boy, but she was a girl, which is why she was abandoned. On the other hand, Ati Batik was the seventh daughter also, but had six older brothers. And they both go on these great, treacherous journeys to save, Baridegi saves her father. In some versions of the story, saves both her parents, but the version I chose was her father. Ati Batik, from the Wehali tradition, saves her six brothers. And so they are these incredible women. So it's a very feminist story. And so that this is like their guiding Nala. And so kind of the way the story goes is Baridegi, of course, she is in the underground for 9 years and finally gets the magic elixir, brings it back to her father, who's already dead, and he is resurrected. So in our story, we imagine that Baridegi gives this to Nala, and Nala, at the end of the show, she is just offering this to her parents, her family who has died, and that's when the show ends. So that's kind of our very abstract narrative. So I had to explain that to explain this story, this tradition. So I'm just going to play this. This is the actual. It's this great orator's telling of the story, and he is named Petrus Tahunahak. I got to stay with a family very near his house, and he was known as Makoan of this region, cutter of words. And he was called upon to do all the ceremonies and everything. So just to hear what the language sounds like.
You're muted.
Sorry, sorry. So you'll hear there's not like a set rhythm, but they tend to repeat. Sometimes they repeat 2 lines at a time. So it's a very beautiful spoken tradition. So now we're going to go into just a little bit of Donghae and Bilshingur, a recording of my teacher singing. So this is my teacher, Sal Hanna. And this is after we were saying goodbye, so I'm a bit teary. But this actually, after a lesson that we had. So I just wanted to show you her beautiful face. And so this is, I'm just going to play it right away. Again, this is just the first part I'll play for you. It's very long, so, yeah. And I'm sure many of you might have already heard this, but here.
모십니다. 볼을 매김네 모십니다. 우땅산에 볼을 매김네요. 아래땅산 서왕민네 양땅에 사랑은 있네
그렇죠.
하회동 참 하지
So beautiful. I love her voice. Fascinating that she, was trained as a pansori singer first, and she can still, of course, sing those songs. Often in the ritual, she'll sing like a big, song. So yes. So then, of course, I tried to learn and imitate her, and so the song I'm gonna play, and I'll like switch. I might have to. I'm going to share my score. Oh, 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 oh. Ah, sorry. I'm going to share my score so you can listen at the same time. So you'll hear, I'll start singing in Korean, 남사는 본이요, 주사하는 국이라, but then I switch to Tetunwe Hali, which is the language that the man was speaking. But I'm still again retaining the way of singing of Donghan Bolushingut. So, and then all the other parts are that I composed, and long process for explaining that, but it was inspired. The notes were all inspired by the actually the Wehali story of me just recording myself 4 times this story. So all the notes are all the pitch material is actually from that. So great. So I will share this score, and I'm looking at the time. Don't worry, I have the eye on the time. So here we go. And great. So can you see this? The notes? Okay. So I'm going to quickly, I hope this works. I'm going to play this. I'm just going to play it. Tell me if it works.
남사는 본이요 주사하는 국이라 사도 강남은 시로 지요 안가는 간이요 갑사는 제자우다
Yes, I'm just going to share a little bit of that. So yeah, actually that was a reduced score. I just realized it didn't have the full score. So yes, I was trying to emulate, the quartet was kind of actually representing to me the Gwangari rhythms, which were very complex, and I did not get to understand exactly how it worked, but it was kind of my impression. But the rhythm in terms of, there's different feels, and I kind of just quantized it. Like it's like you can feel it as 남사는 본이요 주사는 국이라, but the feel is 국이라 사도 강남은 시. But of course they stretch everything. So I thought, well, why don't I write it in kind of 5? instead of like na 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 na, because it doesn't feel like that. It's more like la na 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 na. So I was playing around with that. So yeah, so that's kind of an idea again. So going back to Bartok, it's like the melody is in the foreground and I created this accompaniment to it. But then at times the accompaniment takes over and all those melodies, become prominent, and kind of take over the vocal melody when it's not there. So great. So I think we're ready to, I'm just showing, can you see this now? At least these photos? Great. Great. So just showing you, actually I can just show you. This was when I made it into a solo piece, I got to play in the National Theater of Korea, and Won-il, a wonderful composer, everything, musician, gugak musician and visionary, he invited me to perform. So I invited my very dear friend Cha Sung-min on Taegum and Simon Barker on drums. And then, so we did a trio version of it. And this is after the performance, all my dear friends, the very late, the ones who stayed late. So now I'm just gonna play, it's about a 7-minute excerpt of Nine Doors. So you can see the very last song, this one called Contemplation, is kind of what I'm trying to show or display, kind of what Bartok was talking about. So, you immerse yourself in all these traditions and then you create something that has the essence of it, but is your own creation. So this is my attempt. I have many other examples, but I thought this would be kind of the most cohesive. So yes, so you'll see at the very beginning, biwa. You'll see the storybook. I'm wearing it in a very different way, not traditional way. And you'll see I'm actually playing pansori changdan, but I'm singing in English. And again, it's based on Shinchonga. So same idea that I did with the binari, using English, but with the way of singing binari. I'm doing the same with pansori. So, and then you'll see what I do with the kayagam. And if you remember, it will make sense if you remember the story of Srijoko, who passed away. And then the poetry at the very end that you hear me reciting is by Edward Chang, who's the Taiwanese poet, who passed away sadly as well. So 2015, when I was in Korea for the second time, he passed away. But his poetry is so beautiful, and his daughter translated it into English. So, okay, here we go.
그만나 그 사이로를 기누츠키 And she beats her drum as they sail away, singing Bibi the Gabanai, Bibi the Gabanai. Oh, they fade the way that I like money on the line at Denny. Drum up and I, drum up and I. A woman tricked a man and he did not know it. Bibi the Gabanai. Romekan on your lumaranagamba. Loto item malatse.
from within the thick green camellia leaves, vermilion flowers are blooming. Unexpectedly, I saw tall white egret lifting its long neck, crossing with thin steps, lightly and elegantly. It walked toward its own slender shadow. Yesterday, the company of friends brought happiness. Today, I'm alone, but not lonely. I look toward the sky the egret flew into. An endless, deep blue expanse. Life has no boundaries. When every place can be home.
Yesterday, the company of friends brought happiness. Today I am alone, but not lonely. I look toward the sky. The egret flew into an endless, deep blue expanse. Yesterday brought happiness. Today I am alone, but not lonely. Life has no boundaries. When every place can be home. Life has no boundaries. Home. Life.
That's it. Yay. So, oops. Oops. There we go. So we can, yeah.
Wow. Amazing. Yeah. I'm just trying to digest this wonderful information you just condensed within like an hour and a half. That's really,
Yeah.
really amazing how much you can, how much one person can do with just a open mind. That's astonishing to me, really. And I'm sure we have a couple of comments on Facebook, for example.
Oh, great.
Yeah,
Okay. I haven't seen them.
yeah, I will just read it for you.
Great.
Liat Shapiro said, thank you so much for sharing the beautiful background. The story is so tragic, yet so touching and strength giving.
Hmm.
And then
Oh.
Geraldine Iglesias
My
said,
friend.
oh,
Yeah.
yeah, passionate and deep Jen Shu's work. Congratulations. Hopefully our paths
Oh.
could cross again.
Oh.
And
Yeah.
also Yunji Lee, who was one of the guests last season. She said, so good to see you and great to learn more about your music. I would also love to hear about your future projects.
Oh, yes.
And related to that, actually, Dr. Craig Parker asked the same thing. What project do you envision for the future, especially if you're interested in exploring other Asian musical cultures that you have not yet had a chance to study?
Absolutely.
And John Lentz, that's the
Oh,
final
yes.
comment. But John Lentz
Yes. I
said,
know John.
so many thoughts of how I could evolve my jazz singing.
Oh, beautiful.
Yeah.
Yeah. Wow. Well, I can share a link of my next, actually, I just yesterday, there's my next album is going to be released April 2nd. And it's based on a show that I actually created called Zero Grasses. This is my third solo show. So after Nine Doors, I went to Japan and I had a commission actually. The John Zorn again commissioned me. And I was planning for it to be a very like kind of environmentally focused and the disconnect between humanity and nature but my father passed away. It's like in 2019, so while I was in Japan. So I was like I had this 5-month fellowship, and about a month and a half into it, I again email, that's I talk about technology a lot because it's so strange to have these huge life events communicated through email. It's such a time we're in. And but he seemed well, so it was very shocking for us. And the sheriff is who emailed me because my mom was like dealing with the ambulance and everything, and he just fell asleep in his nap during a nap before dinner. And so it turned out it must have been a heart attack. But we didn't have an autism done. Anyway, it's a long story, but so that experience really changed the show, of course, and my mom gave me my diaries while we were cleaning out dad's closet, and I read them at Civitella, Texu. At Civitella is when I finally had time, because for 6 months from April until August, I was with my mom. We took care of her. I think she's listening now. So everything was focused. I didn't have any time to think about music. And that was fine. I was just being with mom and my brother. And so finally, when I got to Italy, because mom was, in a good situation, I finally read the diaries and really realized, all the experience that I'd had as a young girl from 8 years old until 17 is when I was writing in this diary. And all of that made me think about everything, legacy, family, also race, and also going into being an Asian woman in the industry is not easy. It's a very still patriarchal um, system, and I talk about that in the show, and overcoming that, and also talk a lot about becoming a mother and the challenges of being an artist, woman artist, and handling a family. For any career woman, that's always this conflict and tension. So that's what the show explores. I made an album with my beautiful band, and it's soon to be released, but it's on pre-order, so I put the link there. Um, I am also, as you mentioned, part of a wonderful mentorship initiative, and that's happening now. It's ongoing. We had our first cohort of beautiful artists, and this really came out of the pandemic. We, I felt like there was just such a need for support, not just financially, but emotionally, for underrepresented artists. And so we started this program, Sada Serpa and and with Jordana Elizabeth, who is an amazing critic, music writer, music journalist. And so, yes, we're doing we're taking care of our second cohort right now of artists, um, and I'm just continuing to teach with through my Patreon page, which I know there's Patreons watching. So that has been such a saving grace. Has brought me a lot of joy because it's community, and I get to teach again, which I kind of stopped teaching when I was touring because I was just so busy and tired traveling. So it's gotten me back to that. And I don't teach at an institution. I often do. I'm invited to do lectures at these great institutions. I just did something at Harvard and did something at UCLA, and um, have something at NYU coming up. But I love just teaching and working with musicians, professional musicians, as well as artists who are just trying to get into their music life. Maybe they have an instrument rusting in the closet or getting dusty. So it's really about, again, life has no boundaries. I don't like this split between professional and amateur, uh, you know, um, or even like jazz versus classical, or new music versus not new music. um, I think it's great for us to be, really exchanging, and that's the idea of mutual mentorship. Also, just exchanging talents, craft, and supporting each other, and uplifting each other, especially in this time for artists, which is it's a really difficult time right now. And I feel lucky and I feel privileged. Um, but a lot of my friends don't have those support systems, so that's what we're trying to help in our ecosystem, which is a very fragile one. So yeah, so that's kind of what's happening now. If I didn't forget anything. Oh, there is something you can hear more about our the Tilted Lean In podcast just launched. An interview that I did with Rachel Thomas, who, if you don't know Lean In, it's a amazing vision of Sheryl Sandberg. Of course, you might know her from being part of the Facebook team, but she has a great podcast called Tilted, and they found us. They found M3 and were so drawn to it that they wanted to interview us. So that just came out today, so you can listen and hear more about that. And if anyone is listening who is interested in applying, we have an open call, April. So it happens, I guess we're going to have it kind of in the fourth month of a 6-month period, and it goes in seasons. So now is the winter solstice. 2020 winter solstice cohort. And then in June, for that summer solstice, we'll change to a new group of 12 artists. So yes, please keep an eye out if you're interested in applying. So yeah, any other questions from Facebook?
No, that was it. But
Great.
yeah, and you know,
Yay.
lots of great things going on, and we are really grateful to have you today here.
Thank you.
Yeah, and
Thank you.
yeah, we will definitely keep our eyes on the amazing things you are creating from now
Great.
on, for sure.
Thank
And
you.
yeah, because it's 8:40 at this
Yes.
point, so I will wrap up. So next week we will have another amazing. We all only have amazing guests. So the next week we will have a Korean traditional piri player, Gamin, yeah, who is also doing a lot of contemporary music at the same time. So please join us next week. And yeah, you may stay here, but we will end the Facebook